Thanks for coming, and I just wanted to thank the 92nd Street. I'm new in New York. The Y for inviting me, because actually the first time I met Gary Shteyngart was a couple months ago, and I'd had a couple of drinks, and I immediately hugged him and said, "I'm your biggest fan," and he looked a little bit taken aback and said, "Many of my fans are quite small." And then I didn't realize until I read his new and incredible book that I had stumbled into an important thematic in his mental life. And I just wanted to say that he may think that he's little and small, but to me he's very big, and I feel like I'm opening for Aerosmith. Okay, I'm going to read from Who Killed Tolstoy, that Lauren did the spoiler for. And it's I'm gonna skip a lot, but hopefully it'll make sense. The International Tolstoy Conference lasts 4 days and is held on the grounds of Yasnaya Polyana, the estate where Tolstoy was born, lived most of his life, wrote War and Peace and Anna Karenina, and is buried. In the summer, after my 4th year at Stanford, it was graduate school, I presented part of a dissertation chapter at this conference. At the time, the department awarded 2 kinds of international travel grants, $1,000 for presenting a conference paper or $2,500 for field research. My needs clearly fell into the first category, but with an extra $1,500 on the line, I decided to have a go at writing a field research proposal. Surely there was some mystery that could only be solved at Tolstoy's house. In the library, I plugged in my laptop. Tolstoy died in November 1910 at the provincial train station of Ostapova under what can only be described as strange circumstances, I typed. The strangeness of these circumstances was immediately assimilated into the broader context of Tolstoy's life and work. After all, had anyone really expected the author of The Death of Ivan Ilyich to drop dead quietly in some dark corner? And so, a death was taken for granted that in fact merited closer examination. I was rather pleased by my proposal, which I titled, "Did Tolstoy die of natural causes, or was he murdered?" A forensic investigation, which included a historical survey of individuals who had motive and opportunity to effect Tolstoy's death. Quote, "Arguably Russia's most controversial public figure, Tolstoy was not without powerful enemies. More letters threatening my life," he noted in 1897, when his defense of the Dukhabor sect drew loud protests from the Orthodox Church and Tsar Nikolai, who had Tolstoy followed by the secret police. As is often the case, Tolstoy's enemies were no more alarming than his friends. For instance, the pilgrims who swarmed Yasnaya Polyana, a shifting mass of philosophers, drifters, and desperados, collectively referred to by the domestic staff as the Dark Ones. These volatile characters included a morphine addict who had written a mathematical proof of Christianity, a barefoot Swedish septuagenarian who preached sartorial simplicity and who eventually had to be driven away because he was beginning to be indecent, and a blind old believer who pursued the sound of Tolstoy's footsteps, shouting, "Liar! Hypocrite!" Meanwhile, within the family circle, Tolstoy's will was the subject of bitter contention. "You are certainly my most entertaining student," said my advisor when I told her about my theory. "Tolstoy, murdered, ha! The man was 82 years old with a history of stroke." "That's exactly what would make it the perfect crime," I explained patiently. The department was not convinced. They did, however, give me the $1,000 grant to present my paper. On the day of my flight to Moscow, I was late to the airport. Check-in was already closed. Although I was eventually let onto the plane, my suitcase was not, and it subsequently vanished altogether from the Aeroflot informational system. Air travel is like death. Everything is taken from you. Because there are no clothing stores in Yasnaya Polyana, I was obliged to wear, for 4 days of the conference, the same clothes in which I had traveled, flip-flops, sweatpants, and a flannel shirt. I had hoped to sleep on the plane and had dressed accordingly. Some international Tolstoy scholars assumed that I was a Tolstoyan, that, like Tolstoy and his followers, I had taken a vow to walk around in sandals and wear the same peasant shirt all day and all night. They were some 25 in number, the international Tolstoy scholars. Together, between talks on Tolstoy, we wandered through Tolstoy's house and Tolstoy's garden, sat on Tolstoy's favorite bench, admired Tolstoy's beehives, marveled at Tolstoy's favorite hut, and avoided the vitiated descendants of Tolstoy's favorite geese. One of these almost feral creatures had bitten a cultural semiotician. Every morning, I called Aeroflot to ask about my suitcase. "Oh, it's you," sighed the clerk. "Yes, I have your request right here. Address Yasnaya Polyana, Tolstoy's house. When we find the suitcase, we will send it to you. In the meantime, are you familiar with our Russian phrase, resignation of the soul?" On the first morning of talks, a Malevich scholar read a paper about Tolstoy's iconoclasm and Malevich's red rectangle. He said that Nikolai Rostov was the red rectangle. For the whole rest of the day, he sat with his head buried in his hands in a posture of great suffering. Next, an enormous Russian textologist in an enormous gray dress expounded at great length upon a new study of early variants of War and Peace. Fixing her eyes in the middle distance, consulting no notes, she chanted in a half-pleading, half-declaratory tone, like someone proposing an hour-long toast. Just when she seemed about to sit down, she bounced back up and added, "We will hear more about these very interesting editions on Thursday, if we are still alive." It was fashionable among international Tolstoy scholars to punctuate all statements about the future with this disclaimer, an allusion to Tolstoy's later diaries. After his religious rebirth in 1881, Tolstoy changed his practice of ending each diary entry with a plan for the next day. Now he simply wrote the phrase, "if I am alive." It occurred to me that ever since 1881, Tolstoy had always known that he would be murdered. It was at the time of this conversion that Tolstoy decided to give away all his copyrights to the people. This decision pitted him in what he called a struggle to the death against his wife, Sonia, who managed the household finances and who, over the course of years, bore Tolstoy a total of 13 children. Tolstoy eventually ceded Sonia the copyrights for all his pre-1881 works, but turned the rest over to one of the dark ones, Vladimir Chekhov, an aristocrat turned Tolstoyan whose name contains the Russian word for devil. A doctrinaire known for his heartless indifference to human contingencies, that was a quote, Chekhov made it his mission to bring Tolstoy's entire life and work into accord with the principles of Tolstoyanism. He became Tolstoy's constant companion and eventually gained editorial control over all his new writings, including the diaries, which treated the Tolstoy's conjugal life in great detail. The Tolstoys began to fight constantly, long into the night. Their shouting and sobbing would make the walls shake. Tolstoy would bellow that he was fleeing to America. Sonia would run screaming into the garden, threatening suicide. According to Tolstoy's secretary, Chekhov was succeeding in his plan to achieve, quote, the moral destruction of Tolstoy's wife in order to get control of the manuscripts, end quote. During this period, Tolstoy wrote the Kreutzer Sonata, a novella in which a husband resembling Tolstoy brutally murders a wife resembling Sonia. Anyone investigating foul play in the death of Tolstoy would find much of interest in the Kreutzer Sonata. Skipping ahead. All right, so I'm skipping the part where Tolstoy actually dies, but that's a good story too. On the third day of the Tolstoy conference, a professor from Yale read a paper on tennis. In Anna Karenina, he began, Tolstoy represents lawn tennis in a very negative light. Anna and Vronsky swat futilely at the tiny ball, poised on the edge of a vast spiritual and moral abyss. When he wrote that scene, Tolstoy himself had never played tennis, which he only knew of as an English fad. At the age of 68, Tolstoy was given a tennis racket and taught the rules of the game. He became an instant tennis addict. No other writer was as prone to great contradictions, explained the professor. whose mustache and mobile eyebrows gave him the air of a 19th century philanderer. All summer long, Tolstoy played tennis for 3 hours every day. No opponent could rival Tolstoy's indefatigable thirst for the game of tennis. His guests and children would take turns playing against him. The international Tolstoy scholars wondered at Tolstoy's athleticism. He should have lived to see 85, 90, 100. I'm going to skip to where I find my suitcase just so that's tied in. So an archivist comes up to me. We received a police report today. A certain suitcase has been received and is being held in security. She directed me to the security holding area, which was inside one of the historic white gate towers of Yasnaya Polyana. As the Kubler Elf factory is hidden inside a hollow tree, so was an entire security office concealed within a gate post. Next to one of the officers' steel desks, under a framed portrait of Tolstoy, sat my suitcase. It had been there for 2 days, but the officers hadn't known whose it was. I signed a form and dragged my suitcase over moss and tree roots back toward the conference hall. It was a good opportunity for looking at the ground. I was looking for Hyoscyamus niger, a toxic plant known as henbane or stinking nightshade that is native to Eurasia. Henbane contains the toxin atropine, which is associated with nearly all of Tolstoy's symptoms, including fever, intense thirst, delirium, delusions, disorientation, rapid pulse, convulsions, difficulty breathing, combativeness, incoherence, inability to speak, memory loss, disturbances of vision, respiratory failure, and cardiopulmonary arrest. I could go on with that, but I'm gonna that's you get the idea. All right. Okay, so I'm just going to read the end, which ends with all of the international Tolstoy scholars going in a mass excursion to Chekhov's house. We had to get up early for the last event of the International Tolstoy Conference, a field trip to Anton Chekhov's former estate. Melikova lay directly along the 3-hour route from Yasnaya Polyana to Moscow. In this respect, the field trip made a certain amount of logistical sense. Nonetheless, after 5 days of total devotion to Tolstoy, master of the Russian novel, it felt strange to drop in so breezily on Chekhov, master of the Russian short story and an altogether different writer, simply because one happened to be passing through the neighborhood. Chekhov was 9 years old when War and Peace was published. He admired Tolstoy tremendously and longed to meet him. At the same time, the prospect of this meeting filled him with such alarm that he once ran out of a bathhouse in Moscow when he learned that Tolstoy was also there. Chekhov did not want to meet Tolstoy in the bath, but this apparently was his inescapable destiny. When at last he worked up the nerve to go to Yasnaya Polyana, Chekhov arrived at the exact moment when Tolstoy was headed to the stream for his daily ablutions. Tolstoy insisted that Chekhov join him. Chekhov later recalled that as he and Tolstoy sat, naked, in the chin-deep water, Tolstoy's beard floated majestically before him. Despite his lifelong hostility toward the medical profession, Tolstoy took an instant liking to Chekhov. "He is full of talent and undoubtedly has a very good heart," he said. "However, he does not seem to have any very definite attitude toward life." Chekhov had only a poorly defined attitude toward life, the strange process that brought one eye to eye with the floating beard of the greatest crank in world literature. Today, the stream where they bathed is partly obstructed and full of vegetable life. One of the international Tolstoy scholars who insisted on sitting in it came out completely green. Chekhov, grandson of a serf, never saw the point of Tolstoyanism. Why should educated people lower themselves to the level of peasants? The peasants should be raised to the level of educated people. It's true. Nonetheless, Chekhov remained in awe of Tolstoy to the end of his days. "He is almost a perfect man," Chekhov observed once. And another time, "I am afraid of Tolstoy's death. It would leave a great void in my life." In fact, Tolstoy outlived Chekhov by 6 years. Ever since he was a medical student, Chekhov had experienced episodes of coughing blood. He dismissed them as bronchitis or the flu, but everyone knew the real cause. One night in 1897, while dining with his editor in Moscow's best restaurant, Chekhov suffered, I'm sorry, this is making me so thirsty. Oh, okay, good. Sorry. Chekhov suffered a severe lung hemorrhage. Blood poured from his mouth onto the white tablecloth. He was rushed to a private clinic and diagnosed with advanced tuberculosis in both lungs. He survived the attack, but was, for some days, extremely weak and unable to speak. Only family members were admitted to see him. Then Tolstoy turned up, wearing an enormous bearskin coat. Nobody had the nerve to tell him to leave, so he sat at Chekhov's bedside and talked for a long time about the immortality of the soul. Chekhov listened silently. Although he did not believe in the immortality of the soul, he was nonetheless touched by Lev Nikolaevich's solicitude. The last meetings between Tolstoy and Chekhov took place in Yalta, where Chekhov had gone to die. One day in Yalta, Tolstoy put his arm around Chekhov. "My dear friend, I beg of you," he said, "do stop writing plays." Another time, when the two writers were gazing at the sea, Tolstoy demanded, "Were you very profligate in your youth?" Chekhov was speechless with embarrassment. Tolstoy, glaring out at the horizon, announced, "I was insatiable." How could Chekhov not have sought treatment? How could he not have recognized his symptoms, especially when he spent weeks nursing his own brother, Nikolai, who died of tuberculosis in 1889? I was reminded of a production of Uncle Vanya, the first play I ever saw in Russian, put on some years ago in Moscow. The actor playing Dr. Ostrov had been a television star, famous for playing Dr. Watson in the Sherlock Holmes series on Soviet TV. Watching Dr. Ostrov smoke a pipe, pore over maps, and rail against deforestation, watching Dr. Ostrov fail to notice the important thing that Sonia was in love with him, I had been struck by his similarity to Dr. Watson. "Doctor," I thought, "you see, but you do not observe. For all your scientific enlightenment, you misread the signs." At 6 o'clock the next morning, the 25 international Tolstoy scholars boarded a chartered bus to Moscow. There's a lot of drama on the bus, which I'm going to skip. Then I start to get sleepy because I stayed up all night reading a biography of Chekhov. That's where I'm resuming. I learned that no matter how hard you tried to think about Chekhov in this joint, you kept falling over Tolstoy. There was no way around it, and in fact, the things seemed to have been fated before they were born. In 1841, Chekhov's serf grandfather purchased his family's freedom from their master, a nobleman called Chekhov, who was none other than the future father of Vladimir Chekhov, the Dark One, the beneficiary of Tolstoy's secret will. Chekhov's grandfather paid Chekhov's father 220 rubles per soul. Chekhov père, apparently not a bad guy, threw in one of Chekhov's aunts for free. No wonder Chekhov didn't believe in immortality of the soul. I learned that Tolstoy had seen Uncle Vanya during its first run in Moscow when the role of Ostrov was played by Stanislavski himself. The only positive impression retained by Tolstoy from this production was of the sound of a cricket chirping in the final act. In fact, a well-known actor had spent an entire month acquiring precisely this skill from a cricket in the Sandunovsky public baths. Nevertheless, his masterful chirping was not enough to counterbalance the overall terrible impression left on Tolstoy by Uncle Vanya. "Where is the drama?" Tolstoy once shouted when the play was mentioned. He even harangued the actors, telling them that Ostrov and Vanya had best marry peasant girls and leave the professor's wife in peace. Tolstoy's diary entry for January 4th, 1900 reads, "I went to see Uncle Vanya and was outraged. I wanted to write my play, The Corpse." Tolstoy started working on his play, The Living Corpse, later that month. The Living Corpse, I'm leaving out a lot about The Living Corpse. I dreamed I was playing tennis against Tolstoy. As Alice in Wonderland plays croquet with a flamingo for a mallet, I was playing tennis with a goose for a racket. Lev Nikolaevich had a normal racket, only I had a goose. I served the ball, producing a flurry of fluffy gray down. Tolstoy's mighty backhand projected the ball far beyond the outermost limits of the tennis lawn into the infinite dimension of total knowledge and human understanding. Match point. I handed my goose over to Chekhov, who was next in the line of Tolstoy's opponents. Sitting on the edge of the lawn, watching the Tolstoy-Chekhov game, I suddenly realized with a shiver the identity of the living corpse. It was Chekhov. Tolstoy had written that play about Chekhov, whom he had always intended to outlive. I woke to the crunching of gravel. We had reached Melikova, where we were offered the choice of a full or a bridge tour. "We want the full tour," the conference organizer said grimly, pulling out her video camera. Our tour guide, a pensioner with hair dyed a strange tangerine color, took 20 minutes to guide us from the ticket booth to the front door. "Respected guests," she shouted, "we are now located in the backyard of the neighbor of Anton Pavlovich Chekhov." No single room in Chekhov's house was large enough to contain the entire body of international Tolstoy scholars. We shuffled along a dark corridor. The guide gestured towards various rooms too small to enter. We passed into a tiny parloir, the scene of everlasting, interesting conversations. "Did Chekhov play the piano?" someone asked. "No," the guide exclaimed with great emphasis. "He absolutely did not play." Skipping again. I walked quickly through Chekhov's garden, trying to recapture the spark of mystery. But somehow this time the motive wasn't forthcoming. My heart wasn't in it anymore. I found myself remembering the adventure of the final problem, the first and last story in which Dr. Watson has no trouble and no fun applying Holmes's method. It was, alas, only too easy to do. 2 sets of prints lead to the waterfall and none lead back. Nearby lies the alpenstock of the best and wisest man he has ever known. Later, Conan Doyle recants. Holmes's death and Watson's bereavement turn out to be a temporary illusion, and real life starts again. The late nights, the handsome rides, the peat bogs, the thrill of the chase. But can things ever really be the same between the doctor and the living corpse? Will there not come a time when Holmes has to tell his friend that all the murderers they apprehended were but the pawns of a far greater force, untouchable by human justice, a force even capable of acting independently, with no human agent? Watson will be utterly confused. A criminal act without a criminal actor? My dear Holmes, surely you cannot have gone over to the supernaturalists. Holmes will smile sadly. Nay, old friend, I fear that of all forces, it is the most natural. Call it Professor Moriarty or Madame Lamort, call it the Black Monk or use its Latin name. This killer has infinite means and unfathomable motives. And still life goes on in Chekhov's garden, where it's always a fine day for hanging yourself, and somebody somewhere is playing the guitar. In a hotel in Kharkov, the old professor is deducing the identity of his future murderer. I will be killed by that abominable wallpaper. Interior decoration is often the final problem. Ivan Ilyich was done in by some drapes. Now the samovar has almost gone cold, and frost has touched the cherry blossoms. Dr. Chekhov, loyal custodian of the human body, you who could look in the ear of an idle man and see an entire universe, where are you now? Thank you.
Hello. Height is really a theme. She was not joking. Hi. That was great to listen to. Actually, I have Lauren to thank for sending me Elif's book in galley form ages ago, and I loved it. And that was the first time I'd ever heard it. So it was my pleasure tonight to introduce to you Gary Shteyngart. It is odd that when people think of Gary Shteyngart, they choose so much to focus on his books. I guess I can see why. His 3 novels, The Russian Debutante's Handbook, Absurdistan, and Super Sad True Love Story, are like an overachieving family. Between them, they have won the Stephen Crane Award, the National Jewish Book Award, and the Bollinger Everyman Woodhouse Prize for Comic Literature. They have been decorated with all the good adjectives: hilarious, beautiful, tender, brilliant, unsparing. They have also been listed, called Book of the Year, or Notable, or just the best thing ever by the Washington Post, the New York Times Book Review, the San Francisco Chronicle. The list of lists go on. As a culture, we are pleasantly accustomed to seeing Gary's name in print by now. And then, of course, there's what happens when you open one of these books. Gary's characters are truly funny and vivid, but I have always thought that what makes his work so special, and this includes his new memoir, Little Failure, is how sympathetic he is to the reader. The reader takes on the role of immigrant herself or himself, now entering the People's Republic of Gary Shteyngart. And what a welcoming and marvelous experience that is. Apparently, far more pleasant than actual immigration. But here's the thing, there's so much more than literature to this industrious and, dare I say, hygienic man. It's a shame that people focus on the books when he has so many other projects. For starters, there's his forthcoming cookbook, 100 Ways to Skin a Cabbage. It's not illustrated. Then there's the Dachshund of the Month calendar, which is very, very illustrated. Then there's the line of Gary-related products, the tricked-out asthma inhalers, the Bolshevik-themed bed sheets, and of course, the angst-flavored vodkas. And yet no one speaks of these things. In the end, I suppose these little forays into capitalism read like a footnote in the career of such an accomplished and lovely author. And Little Failure is a huge success already, so I'm sure they will continue to be ignored. But I, for one, am very much looking forward to the dog calendar. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Prince of the East, Gary Shteyngart.
Hi, everyone. I went to Canada and got very sick. Those bastards. Thank you, Sloan, for that lovely introduction. Angst-flavored vodka is almost, it's here in the 92nd Street Y mug. It is great to be here at the Y. The reason I'm sitting is because of my deathly illness. The doctor said I have to sit down all the time now, or I might experience life, and that's not what the doctor ordered. It's wonderful to be here in such wonderful company, Sloan and Lauren, and I am Elif Batuman's shortest fan, so it's kind of a cultural exchange when we see each other. And it's great to be at the Y. This is day 33 of this 149-day tour. It's good to be back home. The things I've seen outside of New York, you don't want to even know. I mean, it's not just Canada. I'm never leaving this island again, I think. Yeah, until I go to Miami on Thursday. So great to be back. What I like most about this book, Failure, is the cover. All right. This is me. I'm about a year and a half old in Leningrad. I think it's 1974. And they had these photo studios in the Soviet Union where you could pose your child with the latest in Soviet technology, like, a phone or something. Right? And so I got the car. And I was very scared. Most boys would grab the wheel and just go vroom, vroom, but I just sat there with my little hands in the car. And only this year, at age 41, have I actually learned how to drive. So watch out, upstate New York. Seriously, watch out. I mean, if you see me coming, I would just dive off the road. This book is really about how I became a writer. People often ask me, how do you become a writer? Well, first you have to be asthmatic. There's no way around that. You gotta have asthma. So I would grow up in a cold, damp place like Leningrad, which is actually built over a swamp. It's perfect. And in 1974, Sloan mentioned the wonderful steroid inhalers. We didn't have any in the Soviet Union. So you really got to see mortality up close as a child because you're always about to die, And I still remember the wail of the ambulances in our courtyard always coming to take me away to the hospital. Very good stuff for a writer. Second thing, you got to have a grandma who writes. My grandmother, Galia, was a journalist for a paper called Evening Leningrad, which is much better than Morning Leningrad, sort of the TMZ of Russian papers. I mentioned that in LA, and I realized, oh my God, half my audience works for them. So one day when I was about 5 years old, Grandma Galia said to me, "Hey, asthma boy, you want to become a novelist, no?" And I said, "How much does it pay?" And she said, "I'll give you a piece of cheese for each page you write." My God, I love this cheese. It was this kind of almost plasticky yellow Soviet cheese. Now, right outside our window was the biggest statue of Lenin in Leningrad. I'm talking huge. We called him the Latin Lenin because he always looked like he was about to rumba, like that. So each morning I'd get up and I'd hug Lenin around his pedestal. I love that guy. So my first novel was called Lenin and His Magical Goose. In it, Lenin meets a goose, possibly from Armenia or Georgia, someplace warm, and together they invade Finland and try to create a socialist revolution there. Then Lenin and the goose get into a huge political fight. Turns out that the goose is Menshevik, and Lenin is, of course, Bolshevik. So in the end, Lenin eats the goose, but not before the reader learns that Lenin also suffers from asthma. My grandmother loved the piece, and she did pay me 100 pieces of cheese for the 100-page novel, but she said, maybe Lenin doesn't eat the goose. Maybe he just sort of exiles him to Mexico. Ice pick. And, but I love that. I mean, this was the first time anyone's ever treated me so nicely, and 100 pieces of cheese. And even today, Random House pays me in cheese, so which I sell out of the back of a van in Canarsie, if anyone's interested. So then we emigrated to America, and I had to leave Lenin behind. And I had to learn English and also some Hebrew, because I was sentenced to 8 years of Hebrew school for a crime I did not commit, but there it was. And 1980 was a difficult time to be a Russian in America. Ronald Reagan's Evil Empire speech, remember all those movies they had? Red Dawn, Red Gerbil, Red Hamster, So I pretended to the kids in Hebrew school that I was actually born in East Berlin, not in Russia. Things are bad when you have to convince Jewish kids that you're actually a German. Funny, Hebrew school. Today, my biggest dream in life is to get my newborn kid into the 92nd Street Y. But it was different back then. Plus, we were really poor. I had one shirt and one pair of pants and a bunch of T-shirts that the parents of the kids in Hebrew school had donated and gathered for us. My toys were a pen and a Chewbacca Star Wars action figure someone had given us that was missing half of his paw. And I had from Russia a fur coat and a fur hat made out of some woodland animal. And the teachers would actually take me aside and say, "You really need to get rid of your fur. Kids will play with you more if you're furless," which is actually true in adulthood as well. And then 2 years after we left, something truly incredible happened that almost changed our life forever. So I'll read you this section. Okay. In 1981, an official letter arrives in our mailbox. "Mr. S. Shteyngart, you have already won $10 million. Sure, our last name is misspelled rather cruelly, but cardstock this thick does not lie, and the letter is from a major American publisher, to wit, the Publishers Clearing House." I opened the letter with shaking hands, and a check sails out. "Pay to the order of S. Shteyngart, $10 million and 00/$100. Our lives are about to change. I run down the stairs into the courtyard of our apartment complex. "Mama, Papa, we won, мы миллионеры, we are millionaires now." "Успокойся," my father says, "calm down. Do you want an asthma attack? But he is nervous and excited himself. "Tak, tak," he says, "let us see what we have here." Around the glowing surface of the orange dining table imported from Romania, we spread around the contents of the voluminous packet. For 2 years, we have been good new American citizens, watching X-rated movies at Main Street Cinema with Emmanuel, the Joys of a Woman. Getting jobs as engineers and clerk typists. My mother's pianist fingers will finally be put to meaningful use. Learning to pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and for the something for which that it stands, unavoidable, with money for all. Боже мой, my mother says, my God, as we look at the pictures on the envelope of a Mercedes flying off the deck of our yacht toward our new mansion with its Olympic-sized swimming pool. Oi, does it have to be a Mercedes? Phew, Nazis. Don't worry, we can trade for a Cadillac. Боже мой, how many bedrooms does this house have? 7, 8, 9. You said the kids at school have houses like this. No, Papa, ours will be bigger. The way I understand it, the house doesn't come with the prize. The prize is just 10 million, and then you buy the house separately. Phew, they always say here, sold separately. You can forget about the yacht, it's dangerous. But I know how to swim, Mama. How do you keep the pool open in winter? Snow will get in. Look, there are palm trees. Maybe it's in Florida. Florida won't be good for your asthma with all that humidity. I want to live in Miami. Maybe there aren't Hebrew schools in Miami. Everywhere in America there are Hebrew schools. We sit down and using our collective 400-word English vocabulary begin to unravel the many documents before us. It says here that, yes, we have already won the $10 million, no disputing that, but a panel of judges still has to award the money to us. First, we must fill out the winner's form and to select 5 national magazines that will be sent to us free, or at least the first issue of each will be free, and then the Americans will likely send us the rest of the $10 million. Fair enough. First, we must acclimate to our new wealth, expand our literacy. I am proud of Papa's new car, a bulbous 1977 Chevrolet Malibu Classic with only 7 million miles on the odometer. But it's time to get acquainted with the finer autos. So I order car and motor, motor and driver, carburetor and drive, muffler and owner. And for the last selection, something that maybe has my Star Wars monkey, Chewie Chewbacca, in it, Isaac Asimov science fiction magazine. I walk solemnly to the mailbox and deposit our claim on the future. Adonai Eloheinu, I pray to our new God, please help us get the $10 million so that Mama and Papa will not fight so much and there will be no razvod, divorce between them. And let us live somewhere far away from Papa's wolfish relatives who cause all the trouble. And let them not yell at Mama when she sends the money Papa says we don't have to her sisters and Grandma Gale in Leningrad, who has been dying for a very long time. Amen. That night, I walk into the Solomon Schechter School of Queens, a multi-millionaire. And the pretty girl with the big teeth, who's always tan from her Florida vacations, kisses me with those big teeth. I haven't gotten the mechanics of kissing down yet. The kids make fun of Jonah Himmelstein, the school's biggest loser, but I say, hey, he's my friend now. Here's $2. Buy us both the Carvel flying saucer cookie ice cream. And keep the change, you garnished, you nothing. We find out the truth quickly and brutally. At their respective workplaces, my parents are told that the Publishers Clearinghouse regularly sends out the "You have already won $10 million" missive, and that these are routinely thrown in the trash by the savvy native-born. Depression settles over our non-millionaire shoulders. In Russia, the government was constantly telling us lies. Wheat harvest is up. Uzbek baby goats give milk at an all-time high. Soviet crickets learned to sing the Internationale in honor of Brezhnev's visit to a local hayfield. But we cannot imagine that they would lie to our faces like this here, in America, the land of the this and the home of the that. And so we don't give up hope entirely. The judges are probably reading our application right now. Maybe I should write them a letter in my burgeoning English. Dear Publishers Clearinghouse, spring is here. The weather is warm and rainy. Birds come from the south to sing us songs. My mother's pianist fingers hurt very much from typing, and she has only one suit for work. Please send us the $10 million right now. We love you, Family Shteyngart. Meanwhile, Car and Parking and all the other Publishing Clearinghouse magazines are starting to pile up, taunting us with many hot, naked centerfolds of the new Porsche 911, the official sports coupe of Reagan-era excess. We reluctantly began to cancel our subscriptions to all of them, except for Asimov's science fiction magazine, a small, square little number with the drawing of an exciting, molting space creature on the cover, holding a boy just like me in its claws. Our dreams of being instantly rich are finished, but we are moving up nonetheless. We are saving every kopeck that comes our way via my father's junior engineering job and my mother's typing. Here's our inventory. I have my pen, my broken Chewbacca monkey, my recently circumcised penis, the Mozart candy wrapper from Vienna Airport, my Soviet atlas, and a bunch of donated t-shirts. My mother has the size 2 Harve Bernard business suit. My father has made a fishing rod out of a stick. Pounds of disgusting marked-down farmer's cheese and kasha will feed us until we die of sadness. And if I don't clear my plate on that worm-soggy shit, the thunderclap of Papa's hand rings against my temple, my mama yelling, "Just don't hit the head!" Or Mama's week-long silent treatment will make me consider taking my own life altogether. Who are we? Parents, мы бедные, we are poor folk. Why can't I have Chewbacca with both paws? Parents, we are not Americans. But you both have jobs now. Parents, we have to buy a house. Yes, a house, the first step to Americanism. Who needs two-handed Chewbacca when we will soon have our own quasi-suburban home? But at lunchtime, the Hebrew school boys do like to take out their Lukes and Obi-Wans and Yodas and set them on their desk to demonstrate just how much property falls within their purview. They talk in their already raspy Jewish voices. I threw out my old Yoda because the paint on his ears was falling off, and then I got 2 new ones and a Princess Leia just so Ham Solo could do her. Me, amazed. Wow. So, I wrote Lenin and his magical goose because I wanted all that Soviet cheese, but I also wanted my grandmother to love me, and that was the easiest way to get her love. And so a terrible connection was forged in my mind that writing novels equals love. What was I thinking? You know, most novelists today are not exactly loved, which is why it's so great that you guys write nonfiction. I gave a reading at a university a few years ago. Now, I'm not going to mention the University of Oklahoma by name, but a student there said, "Excuse me, Mr. Shteyngart, how do I know when a book's been fictionated?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "You know, like when it's not true." And I said, "Well, it says novel on it or stories." She said, "Well, thank you. I'm going to avoid those from now on because I want things to be true." So anyway, I'm so proud to have my first non-fictionated book. Only non-fictionated from now on. But back to my life after not winning the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes. Because I was the red gerbil, the second most hated boy at Hebrew school, I thought, what if I wrote a science fiction novel and showed it to the kids in school? Maybe they'll learn to like me. Here's an example of one of the books I wrote. All right. My parents were kind enough to save it. Let's see. Let's open it up. Chapter 1, Something is Wrong. And was it ever? But then, when I'm about 11 years old, a momentous thing happened in the guise of a substitute teacher called Miss S, and I'll read you that section. On one of our first days on the job, Miss S asked us all to bring in our favorite item in the world and to explain why these items make us who we are. I bring in my latest toy, dysfunctional Apollo rocket, whose capsule pops off with the press of a lever, but only under certain atmospheric conditions. Humidity in the Hebrew school must be below 54%. And explain that I've even written my own novel. This passes largely unremarked as the latest batch of My Little Ponies are paraded around. Finally, Miss S holds up a sneaker and explains that her favorite activity is jogging. "P.U., a boy cries out, pointing at the sneaker and holding his nose. And everyone except me laughs their wicked child laugh. I am shocked. Here is a young, kind, pretty teacher, and the children are intimating that her feet smell. Only me and my 200-pound Leningrad fur are allowed to smell around here. I look to Miss S, so worried that she will cry, but instead she laughs and then goes on about how running makes her feel good. After we have all finished explaining who we are, Miss S calls me over to her desk. "You really wrote a novel?" she says. "Yes," I say. "It is called The Challenge." "May I read it?" "Yes. You may read it. I will brink it." And brink it I do. With the worried admonition, "Please don't lose Miss S, okay?" And then it happens. At the end of the English period, when a book about a mouse who has learned how to fly in an airplane has been thoroughly dissected, Miss S announces, and now Gary will read from his novel. His what? But it doesn't matter, because I'm standing there holding my composition notebook straight from the Square Deal Notebook people of Dayton, Ohio, zip code 45463, and looking out at me are the boys beneath their little flying saucer yarmulkes, and the girls with their sweet aromatic bangs, their blouses studded with stars, and there's Miss S, who I'm already terribly in love with, but who I recently learned has a fiancé, not sure what that means, can't be good, but whose bright American face is not just encouraging me, but priding me on. Am I scared? No, I am eager to begin my life. Introduction, I say. The mysterious race. Before the age of dinosaurs, there was human life on Earth. They looked just like the man of today, but they were a lot more intelligent than the man of today. Slowly, Miss S says. Read slowly, Gary. Let us enjoy the words. I breathe that in. Miss S wants to enjoy my words. And then slower. They built all kinds of spaceships and other wonders, but at that time the Earth circled the moon because the moon was bigger than the Earth. One day a gigantic comet came and blew up the moon to the size it is today. As I'm reading it, I'm hearing a different language come out of my mouth. I do full justice to the many errors, the Earth circled the moon, and the Russian accent is still thick, but I am speaking in what is more or less comprehensible English. And as I am speaking, along with my strange new English voice, I'm also hearing something entirely foreign to the squealing and shouting that constitutes the background noise of my Hebrew school. Silence. The children are silent. They're listening to my every word, and they will listen to the story for the next 5 weeks as well, because Miss S will designate the end of every English period as Gary novel time. And they will shout out throughout the English period, when will Gary read already? School is close to Long Island. And I will sit there in my chair, oblivious to all but Miss S.'s smile, excused from following the discussion of the mouse who learned how to fly in an aeroplane, so that I may go over the words I will soon read to my adoring audience. And God bless these kids for giving me a chance. May their God bless them, everyone. So in the meantime, because most Soviet immigrants are quite conservative, I've subscribed to another little magazine called The National Review. William F. Buckley Jr., editor, Margaret Thatcher on the cover, on every cover. And then I am sent a thick card featuring an American eagle sitting upon 2 rifles. That's right, Gary Shteyngart, age 11, is being welcomed into the National Rifle Association. You can't start too soon with the Second Amendment, I'm just saying. My republicanism flourished even as I left the provinces of eastern Queens and ended up at Stuyvesant High School, the holding pen for multinational math and science nerds in Manhattan. And then my political allegiances underwent a change, and this is how it happened. On Election Day in 1988, I come to the Marriott Marquis Ballroom thinking, this is the day I will finally get laid. I have volunteered for George Bush Sr.'s scorched earth election presidential campaign against the hapless Michael Dukakis, laughing along with Bush's racist, hysterical Willie Horton commercials and all they imply about the liberal Massachusetts Greek. Compassion, after all, is a virtue only rich Americans can afford. Tolerance, the purview of slick Manhattanites who already have everything I want. I'm invited to attend what is sure to be a Republican victory party at the Marriott Marquis, the ugly slab of a building near Times Square. The invitation to the party features a scornful cartoon of the big-eared Dukakis sticking his head out of an M1 Abrams tank, the most unfortunate photo op of his campaign. And I expect an evening of arrogant crowing, of being pressed to the bosom of my fellow conservatives while dancing a Protestant hora over the grave of American liberalism. Yes, tonight is a special night. It is the night I am to meet a Republican girl from a clean white home. Her name will be Jane Carruthers, let's say. Hi, Jane. I'm Gary Shteyngart from Little Neck. My family owns a colonial worth $280,000. I'm the brains behind a Commodore 64 program called the Family Real Estate Transaction Calculator. I go to Stuyvesant High School where my grades aren't so great, but I hope to get into the Honors College at the University of Michigan. I guess tonight it's going to be curtains for the governor of Massachusetts. I enter the ballroom, a dark, gap-toothed immigrant wearing sweat socks and brown penny loafers in my special and only suit, a highly flammable polyester number. I navigate the room filled with sparkling Anglo-Americans clutching single malts, without a word said in my direction, without a pair of happy blue eyes, reflecting the gray sheen of the crisp nylon tie I'd picked up for $2 from a Broadway vendor. As George Herbert Walker Bush racks up state after state on the big screen above us as cheers and laughter circulate around the massively hideous ballroom, I stand alone in a corner, biting down on my plastic cup filled with ginger ale and swatting away the colorful balloons that seem to have an affinity for my static-inducing polyester. Until a pair of teenage blonde lovelies, the girls I've been waiting for all my life, finally approach with needy smiles on their faces, one of them beckoning for me to come hither with her hand. I'm so excited. I somehow fail to see myself for what I am, a short teenage boy, born to a failing superpower, trapped inside a shiny gunmetal jacket, carrying about a mop of the darkest hair in the room, darker even than Michael Dukakis's Hellenic dew. Which one will be my Jane? Which one will trace the W of my weak chin with her pewter fingers? Which one will take me on her boat and introduce me to the millionaire and his wife? You know something, Daddy? Gary survived communist Russia just so he could join the GOP. I think that's very courageous, son. Would you like to throw the old pigskin around with me and Jack Kemp after cocktails? Just leave your topsiders in the mudroom. Hey, one of the lovelies says. Me, debonair, unconcerned. Hey. So I'll have a rum and coke, just a splash of ice and a lime. Mandy, you said no ice, right? She'll have a Diet Coke, lime, no ice. I've been mistaken for the waiter. And the next day, I'm a Democrat. Funny how that works. Could have been in the Tea Party by now. So for the last section, I thought I would backtrack to our first days in America. You know, coming to this country in 1979 from the former Soviet Union wasn't just crossing 8 time zones, it was being teleported to this different and much better planet. It felt like pure science fiction, like Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine. It felt like some kind of advanced civilization. The Chevrolet Corvette looked like it was about to take off for the moon. And there was a lot of pain involved, the pain of losing language and culture and loved ones, but there was also something very beautiful about it too. So here's a little dispatch from that universe, the universe of arriving in America. The first momentous thing that happens to me in Kew Gardens, Queens, is that I fall in love with cereal boxes. We are too poor to afford toys at this point, but we do have to eat. Cereal is food, well, sort of. It tastes grainy, easy, and light with a hint of false fruitiness. It tastes the way America feels. I'm obsessed with the fact that many cereal boxes come with prizes inside, which seem to me an unprecedented miracle, something for nothing. My favorite comes in a box of a cereal called Honeycomb, a box featuring a healthy, freckled white kid, I begin to accept him as an important role model, on a bike flying through the air. What you get inside each box of honeycombs are small license plates to be tied to the rear of your bicycle. The license plates are much smaller than the real thing, but they have a nice metallic heft to them. I keep getting Michigan, a very simple plate, white letters on a black base. I trace the word with my fingers. I speak it aloud, getting most of the sounds wrong. Michigan. What I need now, in a very serious way, is to get an actual bike. In America, the distance between wanting something and having it delivered to your living room is not terribly great. I want a bike, so some rich American neighbor, they're all unspeakably rich, gives me a bike. A rusted red monstrosity with the spokes coming dangerously undone. But what do you want? I tie the license plate to the bicycle, and I spend most of my day wondering which plate to use, citrus sunny Florida or snowy Vermont. This is what America is all about, choice. I don't have much choice in pals, but there's a one-eyed girl in our building complex whom I sort of befriended. She's tiny and scrappy and poor just like us. We're suspicious of each other at first, but I'm an immigrant and she has one eye, so we're even. The girl rides around on a half-broken bike just like mine, and she keeps falling and scraping herself. Rumor is that's how she lost her eye. And bawling whenever her palms get bloodied, her blonde head raised up to the sky. One day she sees me riding my new banged-up bicycle with the Honeycomb's license plate clanging behind me, and she screams, "Michigan, Michigan!" And I ride ahead, smiling and tooting my bike horn, proud of the English letters that are attached somewhere below my ass. Michigan, Michigan! With its bluish-black license plate the color of my friend's remaining eye. Michigan, with its delicious American name. Michigan! How lucky one must be to live there. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And now we welcome my taller compatriots, and we will answer questions or complaints that you may have.
How do you want to do it?
I don't know.
Well, we talked a lot about who is going to sit and stand.
I'll stand. I feel
We're gonna
okay.
stand. Okay. All right, let's do it.
I'm emboldened by your height to
Okay.
stand. Just don't want to get you sick.
I already forgot which one's my water.
This is your water. We crisscross.
Okay.
Oh, so what happens? Oh yeah, who has a question for us?
Yeah.
Nobody?
I have a question for you.
Oh, that's sweet. Okay.
Yeah, it's about Lenin and his magical goose. So there's a very famous story by Isaac Babel called "My First Goose," which ends with the death of. So young Babel comes to to a new job in a military barracks, and everyone's hazing him, and then he wins them over by killing a goose, and then they all roast it and read a speech of Lenin in Pravda, and I couldn't notice. They're so similar.
They're
So
so similar.
did you read that when you were 5?
When I was 5, I was
Or
I was a Chekhovian, so I
Right.
read mostly Chekhov. I didn't read Babel. In fact, didn't read Babel until we got to the States. Another anecdote about that: when I was in this Hebrew school, my father was invited to parents-teachers night, and one of the teachers said, "We understand Gary is something of a genius. He reads Dostoevsky in the original." And my father said, "Only Chekhov." But you're absolutely right. I mean,
So it's coincidence?
It's
Like the
coincidence.
goose?
Russians
There's
love
some-
geese.
There's some
Lenin.
relationship between goose and Lenin, or it's just like it was a matter of time before.
Well, my favorite book at the time was called, what was it called? Niels and the Magical Geese.
Right, I remember.
So they would fly, it was by that Swedish woman, Sven Langenberg. Exactly. She won a Nobel for her prize. My reading in Minnesota didn't go well when I mispronounced that one. But she inspired me to love geese.
Right. Okay.
And Lenin.
Maybe she inspired Babel too, and you came from under her overcoat.
Everyone came out of
her-
out of her geese's wings. Oh, somebody here.
I have a question. I know you said in an interview that your parents had not read Little Failure. Have they read it yet?
I don't think so. No. Part of the thing is, their English is not as hot as their Russian. You, by the way, have a beautiful Russian accent. I could listen to you say "Yasnaya Polyana" all day. Can you say it again?
No, that-
Okay. But it's really nice. I mean, it's kind of exciting. You say it well. And the
Thank
"ch"
you.
is good. You speak Turkish, so you must have some.
We don't have the ch.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah, you made a mistake in your book. You say that something seemed like a Turkish name,
And
it
it's
was
not. Oh my
it was
God.
not.
See, this
We
is
don't
why
have the ocht.
Oh God, I wish I had a Turkish copy editor for
Yeah.
this. Now I can't sell Turkish rights. This is a disaster. But back to your question. No, they usually read stuff when it comes out in Russian. But this book thankfully hasn't been translated, and nobody's bought the rights yet. So let's keep a happy thought.
Wow.
So, since you are interested in conspiracies like Tolstoy's murder, was there a discussion of the conspiracy why Tolstoy never got a Nobel Prize?
Why, who did never?
Whilst that woman with the geese did get the Nobel Prize.
God,
So, what's your theory about it?
it's so nice to be back at the Y. Where questions like this exist. The University of Oklahoma was great too, but this is great. Can you address the Tolstoy?
So the question is, what was the conspiracy that resulted in Tolstoy and the author of the Goose?
Goose won, Tolstoy lost. What happened?
Okay, I get it. That's a really good question. I don't know, but I will get on it, and I hope to have a very convoluted theory.
After you solve the murder.
Right. Yeah. First life and death, and then recognition.
Another question: why didn't Philip Roth win the Nobel yet? Huh?
Pardon me?
And why didn't Philip Roth win the Nobel? And Hunger Games just won it last year. I mean, this keeps
There's
happening.
a difference between Philip Roth and Tolstoy.
Oh, Maron. Okay. Ah.
When did the Nobel Prize start?
When did the Nobel Prize start? I don't know. Let's look at Wikipedia. 1903 or something? No? Anyone know?
1900 started.
1900s.
Huh.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
Tolstoy could have won.
Tolstoy could have won. I don't know. Do you have an answer?
He wasn't the Swede.
No.
But maybe they couldn't read Russian.
She's a very good writer. But
Maybe the Swedish-Russian War had a impact on this. You know, maybe that's why they just couldn't give it to, after Peter the Great stormed in,
Yeah,
they couldn't
probably
give it to a
went back to
Russian.
that.
It went back to that. That's why the Swede, they give it to their own kind. That's awful. Ugh.
Yeah, I have a question for each of you. First, thanks for reading. Curious about the first piece of writing each of you had published, and if that changed your approach or your style of writing at all.
First piece of writing published.
Yeah, the first piece I had published was about this Isaac Babel conference at Stanford, where I was a graduate student. It changed a lot of things. First, it was in an early issue of N+1, which then became popular. So its reception was a big deal. Also, I described myself in that piece as a 6-foot-tall Turkish woman growing up in suburban New Jersey, and to this day, whenever I meet anyone who has read that, they all accuse me of not being 6 feet tall. Like Jonathan Franzen was like, I know 5'10" when I see it. So I actually wear heels to readings now, which I might not do if I hadn't been on the record like that so early. What was your first published?
I'm still thinking about height. The first thing that was really published, I think, was my first novel, The Russian Debutante's Handjob or whatever. Because what happened was that I was going to go to Cornell School of writing, MFA, and then I applied to Hunter College, where my idol, Cheng-Rae Lee, was writing this amazing immigrant literature. And I got into the Hunter program, but I was going to go to Cornell, and I thought, hey, finally please my parents, go to an Ivy League school. And then Cheng-Rae said, if you come here, I can get you published in 2 weeks. And he got me a book deal in 2 weeks. And that was it.
Great.
Beautiful story. It's who you know, people. Manhattan's just who you know.
That's actually true.
Isn't it true? Any other concerns?
Read more. Do say, I mean, this.
All right, it's all copyright. Yeah.
This is a question for Elif. We saw you speak a few years ago, and it was just before you were going back to Turkey. And I was wondering what that experience has been like, having spent a lot of time studying the former Soviet Union and Russian literature, but living in Turkey and how that's affected just your life and your approach to writing and how that experience has been.
Thank you. So the question was, how has I've been in Turkey for the past 3 years, and the question was, how has that changed or influenced my writing after concentrating on Russia before? And yeah, I write in The Possessed about, why didn't I go into Turkish literature since I already know Turkish and Russian's such a pain in the ass, and then I was like, well, you don't get to choose what you fall in love with. It just happens to you. And anyway, so then I had this other realization that you also don't choose what's a gift. That's the definition of a gift, is you don't get to choose it, and sometimes you put it on, you get it, and you're like, what is this? I don't know where to put it, so I'm going to put it on this shelf, and then sometimes later it turns out to be useful. Other times not. But so it was really, I had never lived in, unlike Gary, I was born in the U.S. and I had never lived in Turkey before, and it did influence me a lot. And my second book is, I'm working on a novel now, which is mostly set in Turkey. Yeah, that's
Cool.
cool.
I can't wait to read it. We fictionated it.
Yes, I will fictionalize it.
novels and now memoir. What genre is next for you?
A screenplay. What genre is next for me? Yeah, they're trying to adapt Super Sad Whatever into a TV series.
Super sad hand job.
Super Sad Hand Job is going to be a TV series. Super Sad Hand Job. Jesus Christ. That's what I want on my gravestone, you know. Like, he came, he saw, he handed, he's dead. Yeah, Hollywood is somehow trying to turn that into a thing. And we're trying to figure out who to cast. So I want James Franco to be Joshi, who's the octogenarian who looks 20. And Lenny should be, I don't know, Paul Giamatti maybe? Or that guy from Girls, Alex Karpovsky. He's really great. He was in my trailer. Yeah. But that's, yeah. I would love to be in it. Oh, God, I would love to be in it.
You're really a good actor.
Thank you, thank you. I once took a class with Louise Lasser, Woody Allen's first wife, or second wife, or third wife, or fourth wife. And she was very mean to everyone, and she would scream, and people would cry. But her thing to me was, "You're fake and manipulative." And I'd be like, "I live in New York. What do you want? What am I supposed to be?"
Wait, that's really a compliment from a drama.
I know. I think so. Fake and manipulative.
That's acting.
That is acting. Any last thoughts? Problems?
How did you manage in your book to predict Occupy Wall Street a year before it happened?
Yes, I predicted a lot of stuff in Super Sad Hand Job that the Occupy Wall Street, the sheer jeans which Lady Gaga is wearing. There is now an app that ranks your fuckability when you look at someone through your Google Glass. Google Glass. The problem is that, you know, unlike the great, you know, Zamatyan and Orwell and Huxley, I can only predict. I'm the Nostradamus of about 2 weeks from now. You know, I can sort of. I predict Elif will be eating a roast beef sandwich, unless you're a vegetarian. No, I got it right. I knew it. I knew it. So that's my thing. Is that sadly, but that's the thing about writing. You know, I wrote a super thing because it was. I wanted to write something set in the present, but there's no present left. We're all living in the future now, so that's the only way to do it, I think. So, yeah. Thank you. Igor. Yeah.
I moved to America from Munich. Before then, I was in Kiev.
Can you speak up? You moved from where?
I moved to America from Munich.
Munich. Oh, yeah, yeah.
But before that, I was in Kiev.
Oh,
20 years ago.
that's confusing.
I was wondering if you had any practical advice.
Practical advice. Just keep being who you are. The publishers will come and knocking. No, I think it's wonderful. Munich to Kiev to here. Yeah. Many problems. No? Did you have it?
Oh, no. I think it was Kiev to Munich.
No, was it Munich and then Kiev?
It was Kiev first.
Oh, you were born in Kiev, then you moved to Munich. I got that wrong. I was like, why the hell did you move to Kiev? Unless you like setting things on fire. Wow. So you're born in Kiev. What's your? Did you keep your name, your real name? Yeah. So good. I really admire people like you whose name didn't change. I mean, I wish I was still Igor, Igorek. Gary's so just, no offense to the Garys here, but what the hell is Gary? You know. My parents liked it because of Gary Cooper. They thought that was appropriate. But do you see much Gary Cooper going on here? But I feel your pain. Welcome to New York. It's okay. You know, this is one of the 3 greatest countries in North America. So enjoy it. So, oh, go ahead.
I have like 100 questions, but you said that your first book, it took you about 10 years to write it, and then when you were taking the class, you brought it in for criticism, and they would say, too clever by half, et cetera, while you were being published. How much editing and how much change was done from what you turned into what was published?
How long did it take you to write your first book?
I guess the first part of it 4 years.
4 years.
4 years.
That's pretty good.
Felt long while it was happening.
And you were farming pieces out for essays and stuff?
Well, yeah, it wasn't. It was actually Lauren Stein's idea to make it a book. I wrote half of it as I had written about half or a little more as individual pieces, and then we made a book out of that. And that actual process was less than a year.
Oh my God! Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it took. I started writing this hand job book at Oberlin, but I was very ashamed of it because it was, it wasn't as personal as this memoir, but it did talk about the Russian community, and there weren't any books from people of my generation. There were great Dominican writers like Junot Diaz, Chinese Hajin, Cheng-Ri Lee from Korea, Jumpo had already published Bengal, but nothing from our generation. I was very scared, and so that's why I think I held on to it for so long. Also, I was drinking heavily and mentally ill and all that stuff, but that didn't help either. And when Cheng-Ri did say, you're going to give me a book, I'll get you a book deal, I wasn't supposed to tell people in school that I had a book deal, and so they all said, yes, you're clever by half, this work sucks, go into a different line of work and stuff like that. But then I told them, finally I was allowed to reveal that I had a book deal, and they said, oh, it's great, who's your agent, And that's the way a good writing program works. It just whittles you down till you have nothing, and then you spring back like a phoenix.
Who are some of your favorite current authors? And if you've, I'm sure you've read Turkish literature. Who are some of your current, favorite authors?
I actually. I'm sorry.
So there are that many great Turkish authors that you keep
No,
thinking of.
they're great authors. I don't read a whole lot of Turkish literature. When I was there, I was just suffering to keep my head above the basic level of comprehension. So I wasn't doing frivolous things like reading literature. Also, for 2 of the 3 years I was there, I was a judge on the Booker International Prize. So it was like 1,000 novels, and
Well, they don't have to be Turkish.
Oh, I thought you said Turkish.
Oh.
Well, enough for Turkish, but if you don't have any Turkish favorites, we'll hear the other ones. And forget it as well.
There's that Pamuk guy, right?
Yeah, he's really good. Orhan Pamuk. He's very good.
One of my favorite Turkish writers of the 2 I know.
Yeah. Elif Shafak is also very good and an extremely sweet person. There's another, the more famous Elif is Elif Shafak. Tanpınar, yeah, so he just came out. Tanpınar is extremely difficult for me to read. I am very happy that Time Regulation Institute just came out in English. I did try for about, I think 3 weeks to read it in Turkish, and I was on page 20, and I was just like, I can't live like this. Yeah, he's really.
You need an Ottoman to modern Turkish dictionary in order to be able to read.
Yeah, the grammar is the modern grammar, but there's just so many, the sentences are so long, and then it'll be like a sentence that sounds like a sentence that I know, but I don't know a single word in that sentence except for the parts of grammar.
I guess, what do I read? I'm not a big reader, I'm more of a writer. No, I like Sorokin in Russia, he's the satirist.
I really like Sorokin.
Yeah, I like Sorokin quite a bit. I think he really nails this, the Putin regime and the Putin era, really. Wonderful books. In America we have some good writers.
Lydia Davis.
Lydia Davis, short and sweet. Nabokov, well, but he's dead. He's so dead. But I love him. I teach him in all my courses. Live ones. Well, Donna Tartt's The Goldfinch, obviously. I'm just throwing that out there to see a reaction. I haven't read it yet, but I will soon. It was okay? You liked it?
Yeah, I thought so.
Okay. That was the big book of last year, so yeah.
I'm rereading Middlemarch now because it's like you have to. Everyone, because of Rebecca Mead.
Rebecca Mead, yeah. It's a very nice book. Any last thoughts or concerns about? My tour started out with a woman who gets up. This is my first reading ever. It was on the Upper West Side, which is across the park. And a woman gets, Symphony Space, you may have heard of it, gets up and she says in a thick Russian accent, "I am a Republican and I am proud." Says, "It is people like you and Philip Roth and Woody Allen who are killing Judaism." And then she comes up with her daughters and says, "Oh, my daughters are your biggest fans. Would you mind taking a picture with them?" She said, "I think you'll win the Nobel one day."
What's with these people?
I love them. They're my bread and butter, you know. Without them, yes, you, sir.
Gary,
Yeah.
when you were in high school,
Yeah.
it's a very scientific high school, were you tempted to become a mathematician, a physicist, or was it always
I'm going to buy you my memoir so that you can see what a horrible math and science person I am. I can't add three things together. I'm a disaster. My accountant makes fun of me. I mean, it's like, I'm hopeless. I don't know why. My father's an engineer, and many Russians are supposed to be good mathematicians and chess players, but whoosh. And I got 200 on the analytics section of the GRE. So this is, it goes down to 300. That's the base score. And I managed to get 200. I just can't do it. So at Stuyvesant, I was probably the worst student there. And then I barely got into the Oberlin Institute for Special People, which is a college. So that's it. Yeah. Very good. Thank you so much for coming. Yeah.